Hello everyone, this video is called Ratification, and we're going to be talking in this video about the final battle over the Constitution. But as we all know, living in 2013, that's not really true. We battle over the Constitution all the time. Our government currently, I'm recording this video in October of 2013, and our government is actually deadlocked and shut down at the moment, and they're still fighting over the role of government and the power of government. So you're going to notice that the fight that the framers of the Constitution are having over the Constitution, it's the final battle that they have in getting the Constitution passed, but it's not the final time that we're going to argue about the Constitution. In fact, we do that all the time, even 200 plus years after this all happened. So there's something to look forward to. We'll keep talking about this issue. Okay, so let's sort of recap what has happened since this is the last video or one of the last videos in this topic. Let's talk about what's happened so far, just to kind of get us all on the same page. The Articles of Confederation was our first government, and it was failing. There were huge economic problems. Shays' Rebellion happened, and it was basically a gigantic mess. So a new group formed. It was called the Constitutional Convention. It was kind of led by James Madison and other leaders of the time, and they formed to fix the government. And once they all gathered in Philadelphia to fix the government, they very soon decided just to write a new one, start from square one. This began in May or June of 1787. The group argued over the new government for about 4 or 5 months. And eventually, after this 4 or 5 month period of them sitting in a room and yelling at each other and hashing things out, they produce a document called the Constitution that outlines a new system of government that most people that were there sign and agree to. I think 55 of the 80 or 90 or so. So more than half of them eventually sign it. The other half left at some point or just didn't agree with it and didn't sign it. So that brings us to our next point. Many people involved disliked this new government. They did not sign the Constitution. And the way that this committee left this work is they said, okay, we have this new government. We have to have the states agree to it before it becomes the actual government. We can't just write it and say it's a new government. We live in a democracy. People need to choose. So they said, okay, here's the process. 9 states out of 13 have to ratify this Constitution. Once that happens, it will become the new government. If that doesn't happen, it won't become the new government. It just goes away. So ratify means to approve officially. So that is what needs to happen. 9 states out of 13 have to approve officially this Constitution. Then you can have elections and get the government set up and all that good stuff. Now remember, Rhode Island did not attend this convention. Only 12 of the states even came. So if Rhode Island didn't even have anybody here, you can imagine they're not going to like the Constitution. They're not going to ratify it. So there's really only 9 of 12, which makes it a little bit harder to happen. It's got to be about 3/4. Okay. So here's the reason why ratification of this Constitution was so hard. Not everybody agreed on it, and 2 distinct groups formed. One called Federalists and one called Anti-Federalists. This is definitely something you're going to want to have down in your notes. So the Federalists were a group of people that, as you can imagine, wanted a stronger federal government. They liked the idea of a government that had more power. The Anti-Federalists were the exact opposite. They were afraid of a strong government, and they wanted a government that had less power. So although the Anti-Federalists didn't like the Articles of Confederation, they also didn't like that this new government, the Constitution, gave the government more power. They didn't like that either. Okay, so let's kind of delve into the Federalists and Anti-Federalists a little bit more. The Federalists are easy, stronger. Anything that makes the government stronger, they like. They don't necessarily want a king, but they want a stronger central government that's going to have more power, like taxing, controlling the states, things like that. The Anti-Federalists, they fear power. And a couple of things that they were concerned about, they felt that this Constitution gave too much power to the national government and that the states were too weak. They also felt like there was no Bill of Rights in this Constitution, which meant that the government could take away things like freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of religion unless it was specifically outlined in the Constitution itself. They didn't like that the national government could maintain an army in peacetime. They didn't feel like that was necessary. It gave them too much power. They thought that the executive branch, run by the president, had too much power and could become a monarchy. So the Anti-Federalists fought against this Constitution for these reasons. So here's the debate. You have one group led by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, among others, they wrote things called the Federalist Papers, which were basically essays published in the newspaper, and they said why the federal government was good. They were Federalists. The other side, led by Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, George Mason, they spoke and wrote the opposite. What ended up happening was that some states agreed, some states didn't. There was a deadlock. The Federalists couldn't get their 9 states. The Anti-Federalists were winning. They were keeping the 9 states from approving the Constitution, and it looked like all of that work to change the Articles of Confederation might be lost, and this new Constitution might not get accepted. So another compromise was needed if this Constitution was going to become the law. So here's what ended up happening. It's actually pretty simple, and I think worked out well for both sides. The Anti-Federalists, because they feared tyranny, they feared power, to ease their concerns, the Federalists agreed that they would add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. We would add in a list of things that the government can't do to restrict their power some. This made the Anti-Federalists happy since they feared government power. The Bill of Rights, as we call it today, it protects freedoms that the government can't take away. Things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of press. They're all listed in our Constitution that says under no circumstance can the government take these things away from us. So it makes the government weaker and it makes the people have guaranteed rights, which made the Anti-Federalists more comfortable with the Constitution. So because of this compromise, because the Federalists allowed the Bill of Rights to be put into the Constitution, eventually the Constitution is ratified by the 9th state in 1788, and the government began operating in 1789. The Articles of Confederation were no more. The Constitution is now our first government. George Washington was elected as our first president in 1789, and the first thing that happened was the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were added. Okay, so to recap, you have the disagreement, Federalists on one side, Anti-Federalists on the other side, and they are fighting each other over the Constitution. They argued for many months, and there was a deadlock. Seems to be a theme in this unit, right? Eventually, there was a compromise. The Bill of Rights was added, and then both sides agreed. Hooray! Good for them. And then the new Constitution went into effect in 1789.